She's a big girl.
Hello again, and welcome to another episode of Watt's Single Track. Today we are going to be going over this beauty and the beast known as the ExtremeBull Commander Pro, and we're going to go into the pros and the cons, the ins and the outs, and in general my overall impression of this wheel, especially from a trail riding perspective. So hang tight, enjoy the footage, and like and subscribe for more. So we're gonna start the video out. I took the Commander Pro to the proving grounds where I take all of my new wheels out. This place is a dirt bike OHV park, and these are black diamond trails, and they're definitely fairly difficult on a EUC, and a really good place to prove what a EUC is capable of handling. And this run right here just goes to show exactly why I take wheels out here. Just watch the suspension, and that speaks volumes to it. This is coming up on one of the roughest, gnarliest, chunky little areas in this particular run. And I slow it down into slow-mo just so you can really see the suspension fully absorb all the impacts. I even actually backspun the tire doing mid-air braking right there during one of the drops. But this wheel really, it does fantastic, especially for 95 pounds. I really did not think that it would do as well as it did out here. But overall, I succumbed to the muddy conditions on the trail before I had an issue with the wheel.
She's a big girl.
So we're gonna go over the pros and the cons of this wheel and it being 95 pounds. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing, especially for trail riding? These were all very serious questions that I definitely had my reservations about as I was unboxing the wheel. But in the background, I'm gonna let this run play out. This is a downhill run out in Nevada City called Hooch Trail. Fantastic trail, a lot of flow, a lot of berms, and a lot of little doubles and small jumps. All sized, of course, for mountain bikes, which means they are perfect for an EUC. So I guess I'll start out with sort of a pro and a con, kind of oxymoron right there, but it's kind of both all at the same time, is the weight. That's the biggest factor. That's the biggest thing that hit me when I picked this box up. I did not have a hand truck, and I damn near almost blew out my back. Like, this is no lightweight wheel. And my initial impressions just off picking the box up, when I unboxed it and I first stood on it and I tried to pendulum in my living room, I almost fell over. The weight is real. It's a real serious factor when considering, especially a wheel for trail riding. But at the same time, is that weight good or is that weight bad? Because I really enjoyed the T4 versus my Master just because of the weight savings and how much lighter the T4 was over the Master. But at the same time, the Master is like my go-to wheel for trail runs and racing. So coming from somebody who rides a Master every day that probably weighs about 85 pounds after you have all the Clark fairings and everything else on it, I found the Commander Pro initially to be way too heavy, and my gut said this wheel is not going to work out, especially for running trails and jumps and things like that. But as you can see just in this video in the background, once I acclimated to the wheel, Right there, I almost slipped and hit that tree. Just goes to show you this wheel can be nimble too. It's not the wheel, it's the rider and how you ride it, I guess, is the bottom line short story of this. The weight does seem significant. After riding with it for 3 or 4 weeks, I got about 700 miles on the trails on it, and now it's become second nature to me. I can flick this thing around just like my master. If anything, this wheel, even though it's heavier, has better handling characteristics than my master, and I think a lot of that has to do with the weight distribution. I think the weight distribution in a wheel is really important, and after riding a EX30, my master, the T4, the Commander Pro, I'm starting to learn that it really, what makes each EUC unique is the way the batteries are built into the wheel and how that distributes the weight in accordance with the rest of the frame. The Commander Pro is a top-centered heavy wheel. The center of gravity is definitely high up, whereas the EX30, the center of gravity is very down low. The advantage to having the down low center of gravity for the EX30 is it makes it want to stand upright and it makes it very stable. But at the same time, that makes the EX30 difficult for me to off-road, whereas when I get on the Commander Pro, it responds much more like a master that has the higher center of gravity. So when you go to lean it over into a turn, it's a lot easier to pitch sideways and keep it sideways in a turn. And that's important when you're running berms. I will say though, I think the Commander Pro is probably better, more evenly balanced than the Master, which actually kind of makes it handle better. The Master is just very top heavy, so the Commander Pro really was a pleasant surprise for me in terms of the handling characteristics and how the weight's balanced. Overall, really thought that the weight was going to be an issue, but it's turned out to be one of my favorite things about this wheel because it makes sending it over little jumps and gaps super easy. The wheel just carries itself effortlessly through gaps. You don't even have to push just because it weighs enough that it can carry itself through anything. So, since we went over the weight and kind of how that, I guess in some people's eyes, I definitely see some people are going to say the weight is a con or a disadvantage to this wheel. Bottom line, I would beg to differ. It's because of that gyroscope force of having that wheel be so big and so heavy. When it's going, it is very stable. That being said, at a very low speed, yes, it is a much more difficult wheel to maneuver and will take more work from the rider, but isn't something that you can't easily adjust to within a few weeks or a couple hundred miles. So now I'm going to go into the pros of this wheel, or the things that I liked and enjoyed about this wheel. The number one thing that blew me away right away was the fork style suspension. All I can say is wow. I tried the Sherman S a while back and I really liked the style of suspension. I just didn't like that it was 100 volt. Then once the Commander Pro came out, had the same suspension, or similar suspension. Don't quote me, it's not the exact same. But similar suspension, fork style suspension, but at 134 volts and 3600 watt hour, it was a no-brainer wheel for me to pick. The suspension really, it almost makes it feel like you're riding on a cloud. It's super plush. Now, it does take some feedback away from the tRaiL, but any suspension wheel is going to do that. I just think the Commander Pro and wheels like the Sherman S do it a little bit more than others, just because of the fork style suspension is so buttery smooth. But that, again, that's not a bad thing. It's just something you learn to adapt to, just like you learn to adapt to ride a solid axle when that was all that was present at the given time. And to focus in a little bit more on the suspension, I did manage to bottom it out, I think, once or twice, hitting a deep cross rut across a trail going about 30-35 miles an hour, and I can be very thankful the suspension saved my ass. There's times in the video where you'll hear a ding sound, and this is one complaint. The motor cable will smack down into the metal fender, and it makes like a Mario getting a coin sound like in a Mario video game. So it's kind of annoying, but I put a little bit of foam around it since, and that seems to have fixed it. But in general, with 90 millimeters of suspension and adjustable rebound and compression, I really love this fork suspension tenfold over my Master suspension. Part of that's because the Master linkage is a terrible design, but that's a different story. Just at the end of the day, I really do enjoy this fork style suspension, and I think it is super effective at riding trails and things like what I'm doing in these videos. Also, being at 90 millimeters of suspension, it had 10 millimeters more than the Sherman S, so that's also another reason why I chose to buy the Commander Pro versus the Sherman S. But I was on the fence about the Sherman S, almost considering maybe buying the Patent coming up here, but we have the wheel that I worked on with Begode, the Extreme, that's going to be coming out. So I'm going to be getting that, and most likely going to be buying a Commander Pro Mini, just because of how much I love the suspension on this Commander Pro itself. And it would be pretty cool to compare the Commander Pro Mini suspension to this type of suspension, or the linkage suspension that's going to be going in the Extreme. But suspension wheels are definitely coming into their own. No more V11 S18 garbage that we had. It was good garbage. It got us to where we're at right now. Don't get me wrong. But at the same time, I feel like Begode and ExtremeBull are definitely alongside with Leaper Kim to help push the boundaries of what these suspension wheels can do. So I'll just go and end it with wrapping up with talking about range and mileage. So on the street, I can get about 70 miles out of this wheel, and for trail riding, I can get a solid 55 to 60 trail miles of riding balls to the wall however I want, up or down inclines, whatever speed. So you can get a really good solid trail day out of this wheel. And if you have a Roger charger, you can charge it up at 10 amps or any other fast charger. You can charge the wheel up really quick. But to be honest, 50 miles of trail riding, and show me somebody who is not exhausted after that and ready for a charge break anyway. This wheel will more or less outlast you for the day, especially if you're choosing it for a trail riding wheel. Sadly enough, I think this is one of the most overslept on wheels, since nobody's really given ExtremeBull much of a run besides their Commander, because that X-Men wheel they made didn't do well. But I think the Commander Pro is a very overslept on wheel, and highly would recommend getting one. Just wanted to give a huge shout out to my sponsor, EVs up in Canada. guys.